And we're live.
We are live. Yep. And just gonna make sure. Yep. Seeing it on seeing it on YouTube. So we're good to go. Hey
Right.
DMac, how's it going?
Going good. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for popping on to the second episode of the Stamp Show.
My pleasure. Yeah.
So we'll just dive right into it, and maybe for folks that aren't familiar um, with Arweave, what is Arweave?
That's a great question. Um, Depending on what your experience is in the space and how much you understand about blockchains, the description of Arweave can vary. But I think at a high level, Arweave is a decentralized protocol that offers permanent storage, and it's a blockchain protocol, which means that the the data stored on Arweave is cryptographically secured. It uses math to make it tamper proof. Um, and how it works is the protocol defines how data is stored on the network, and anyone who wants to participate in the protocol can join the network. And there's a couple of different rules. Like for us, people who want to upload our data, we can just post our data to a node on the network, and that's just a computer that's connected to the network. And then those nodes, they're performing a task called mining. And what they're doing is they're constantly proving that they're storing Arweave's data, and they're sharing it amongst themselves. And what this does is it creates many replicas of data that's been uploaded to Arweave. And this makes it fault tolerant, so that if there's ever some kind of flood or I don't know, some big storm, a power surge, something like that, like your data is not destroyed. And what happens on Arweave is you pay an amount to store your data permanently. And the very unique thing about Arweave is that it's a one-time fee. So you pay upfront, and what the protocol does is it pays for 200 years of storage for multiple copies of your data. And it makes very conservative assumptions about the future. It assumes that technology is only going to improve hard drive storage at a rate of 0.5% per year. And what happens is each year that the technology improves more than 0.5%, it extends out the duration that the data can be stored. And so if you run simulations of the various parameters under most reasonable versions of the future, Arweave is able to fund the data for 10,000 years or more. Under the very worst and most pessimistic conservative assumptions, it can fund it for 200 years. And so that's how Arweave offers permanent storage.
Very cool. And so the stamp protocol is built with a foundational layer of Arweave, but we always talk about the Permaweb, and the Permaweb is kind of on top of Arweave. Can you kind of describe kind of the difference between well, what is the Permaweb, and maybe what makes it what kind of separates it from Arweave?
Sure. Yeah. Well, once you have a permanent data layer, you can start building things on top of it. And this is one of the things that really excited me most about Arweave when I was exploring crypto and looking to build applications, decentralized, censorship-resistant applications. As I explored various different chains, I found that a lot of them had smart contract behavior, but when you wanted to build an interface to interact with that smart contract, you would have to store it on Vercel or Amazon Web Services or something like that, which is not very censorship resistant. But because of Arweave's ability to scale and store large amounts of data, it became a substrate or a layer which you could deploy your web-based front ends. So you can actually deploy a single page application to Arweave and have it interact directly with the data that exists in the network. And so what the Permaweb is it's this layer of services built on top of Arweave's permanent data that allows for like a vibrant and responsive web experience. So instead of having to wait a really long time to be able to retrieve data or wait for it to post, these services built on top. Yeah, Tom's sharing the screen here. You can see there's the Arweave protocol at the bottom. All the nodes are talking to one another. They're sharing data. They're proving that they're storing it permanently. And then on top of that, you have Permaweb services, and you have things like transaction caches. You have bundling, which helps scale the amount of transactions you can upload to the Arweave network at any one time. And you also have the ability to run things like queries, transaction queries. And these services built on top of Arweave enable application developers, web application developers, to easily access the Arweave dataset. And what that does is allows them to build Permaweb applications, which are websites that are deployed permanently on Arweave, that are able to interact with the network and read users' data and display it in these applications. And then I think the important part there too is that the Permaweb is built around users and their wallets and the data that they upload. So to upload data to Arweave, you need an Arweave wallet. And what this does is it makes every user the verifiable author or owner of their data. And the cool thing is that because it was uploaded with their wallet and their identity, the data can migrate from app to app. And this is one of the exciting things about the Permaweb. It's because the data exists on this shared permanent data layer at the bottom. No matter what app you're using, you can bring your data into that application.
Very cool. So Arweave is kind of the data lake, and then the Permaweb is really like a full stack platform for building decentralized applications.
Yes, absolutely. And the best part is that these applications are stored on Arweave themselves. So once they've been uploaded, as a user, you'll never be in a situation where you no longer have access to the application, or you're using an application, you're enjoying it, and then the application developer decides that they're going to add in some features that are more value extractive. They're going to try to build a walled garden or something like that. But with the Permaweb, because each version of the application is deployed permanently on Arweave, you can always just continue using the version of the application that you like the best. And so what this does is it builds in incentives for application developers to make sure that every version of the application that is built improves on the previous one in a way that adds value to their users.
That's really cool. So even if once the development team has deployed an app, right? So I deployed Stamp Protocol. Even if I wanted to remove it for whatever reason, because of the Permaweb and Arweave, it literally makes that impossible.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And so it enables you to build these applications that can have a life of their own. And if you, as a builder, if you're building this web application, building it as open source means that even if you get tired of it and move off, other people can take up the reins and fork the project and continue to make new versions, all with all previous versions still being accessible.
Very cool. And because of that, there's kind of these characteristics that are, I wouldn't say unique, but they definitely are different than, let's say, Web 2. And one of those is this concept of data composability and data protocols. And Justin's here asking a question about protocols on the Permaweb. And we have the Stamp protocol on the Permaweb. We have other protocols, but what protocol do you think you'd like to see that's not there, or not like kind of in testing mode, if you will?
Interesting. Yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at protocols. I and this is just for me personally, like I really like the idea of there being a true layer 2 built on top of Arweave. And so what do I mean by a true layer 2? So um, if you think about a network being layers, then the first layer is a network of nodes, like shown in the bottom of the diagram, and then the next layer would also be a network of nodes. And I guess maybe the easiest example of this is like Lightning over Bitcoin. Like both of those are actual networks with nodes that join the network and communicate with one another. And I really like the idea of having some uh, for example, a project that I've been working on in the background for quite some time called MyMail implements a network of inbox nodes that act as a mix network for delivering messages, so that it obscures the sender and receiver by passing it through a number of inbox nodes on the network. And there's a whole class of very interesting problems that you can solve when you have this very cost-effective storage on Arweave, where you can store the history of a ledger or actions, and then you can have another network that's optimized more for a specific task or compute or liveness or something like that. That's built on top. That's just archiving its history to Arweave. We're I think we're starting to see some of the beginnings of stuff like that, like with Momoka, with what Lens is doing, where they have an execution environment that's settling and archiving its history to Arweave. I think that's a very interesting solution, and I think they're doing a great job of it. But I would love to see like a full. I mean, imagine like a Lightning payments network on top of Arweave, or like a full like mixed network for message delivery on top of Arweave. Those are those are definitely bigger lift, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds cool. That's a great answer. And just to kind of um, uh, clarify for the audience, currently there's kind of three kind of categories of, maybe not L2 is the right word, but services on top of Arweave. You kind of have the gateway services that basically allow data to be presented through um, web servers and browsers. And then you have the bundling services, which really make the ability to write a lot of data to Arweave. It kind of unlocks the blockchain mechanism from 1,000 transactions per block, because you can bundle. Now you can literally send multiple data items for a given block. So it really increases that throughput, if you will. And then the third one is kind of these indexing services, which allow you to query the data using tags, which are part of the transaction metadata on the transaction to return sets of transactions back. Did I explain that fairly well?
Yeah, no, that's great. And so there's a couple different types of protocols. Honestly, one that seems really obvious to me, that's sort of closer to uh, uh, less of a lift than building an entire network on top of Arweave, but just a data protocol. I think like a universal commenting protocol would be amazing, like Discus, but like on Arweave and permanent, and being able to use that in a composable way where you could add comments to any piece of data that's added on Arweave, signed by the user's wallet, so that they could prove their authorship. I think that would be super cool, just to get more people, or make it easier for people to interact around the content that they're discovering on Arweave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there's some folks working on it. I think Justin mentioned Echo, which is working on that. So that's definitely one to check out. But yeah, I agree. I think comments, obviously stamps is like kind of taking a like button and making it a protocol. But I think I could kind of do the same thing for comments as well, using kind of the same, you you know, playing to the scalability strengths of the network. And one of the I think one of the biggest unlocks is SmartWeave and the ability to use smart contracts on the network. And we're seeing a lot of experimentation in that area. But what do you think? Do you think SmartWeave and smart contracts is that an L2, or is it just a would you consider it a developer service on
I
top of
think
the
it's
platform?
right now. I think a lot of the smart weave experimentation we're seeing, uh, it's closer to a service. I think it leans that way, but it's I mean it's very early. So I think SmartWeave is one of many different execution environments that will be run on top of Arweave. So, for example, I mentioned Momoka before. Um, for someone to verify the transactions that are running through Momoka, they just run an Ethereum archiving node, and they just read those transactions directly from Arweave, which can be stored very cheaply, like 1,000 times cheaper than they can if you actually post them to Polygon. And you just run them through an Ethereum archiving node, and it'll populate the state of the contract. SmartWeave is a very similar thing, but it uses the JVM, like the JavaScript virtual machine, to evaluate the state of the contract. And I expect that there'll be more and more virtual machines that take advantage of how much cheaper it is, because blockchains are these permanent ledgers, like these where they store the order, the sequence, and the time, and the of all of these transactions in order, so that they can be recalculated by anyone who's participating in the network. But it's very expensive to post these transactions elsewhere on networks that weren't designed to be a scalable permanent data layer. And so I think there's going to be a lot of optimizations going forward where people experiment with different smart contract execution environments, storing the transaction history on Arweave.
Very cool. Yeah. So, again, execution is something that's very hard to decentralize. But just shifting gears a little bit, for folks that are, kind of curious about building on the permaweb, why would you kind of recommend to developers building on the permaweb? Is there like really core use cases you think that's really a sweet spot for the permaweb?
I think one of the things that surprises people about when they first start using Arweave is just how easy it is. Like if you've tried to build applications on other blockchains that aren't a persistent data layer like Arweave that's designed to scale, you have to do a lot of work. Like I remember reading state out of Solana smart contracts, and you literally have to like unpack the bytes, like like you have to read a byte stream and like split it off into a struct or something like that. Like it's it's a lot of work. And I think what surprises a lot of people when they start building on Arweave is just how familiar the developer experience is, how much like you can use React, you can use Vue, you can use Svelte, like you can use any of the frameworks that you already know and are familiar with. And then the sweet spot there is imagining, so what could you do with a permanent data layer? One I think of the things we're still in the early stages of unlocking the potential of is this idea of data composability. The fact that all of the users have posted their data to this global queryable data set, which you can just tap into to get over the cold start problem with your application. So one of the tutorials in the ecosystem is the public square tutorial, and one of the exciting things about it is like you start building this Twitter like application, but once you implement the first GraphQL query, you realize there's like months and years of history already just there. And this is a big difference from the traditional web, where like, you know, there's like five websites that on the internet that people visit, and it's kind of weird, because like, anyone can put up a website. Why is there just five that people go to? And especially when you think about things like social media, like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, people go to these sites because of the network effects that exist there. That's where everybody else is, and that's where they're interacting. And these sites have been built by these corporations that have had very carefully put walled gardens around their network effects, and made sure that like tweets don't end up on Facebook, and Facebook posts don't end up on Twitter. And so all of the users of these applications are kind of like prisoners a little bit. Like, it's really difficult to leave. And what happens with Arweave and with the Permaweb is everyone who's building a social application on Arweave, they're posting it to this global data set that doesn't have any walled gardens around it. And what that means is you can go and you can grab the posts from MetaWeave, and you can grab the posts from Public Square, and you can grab the posts from these different applications that are allowing users to make posts to Arweave, and then you can combine them all together, such that when a user comes to your application, they may find that their posts are already there because your application's just been able to read them directly from Arweave. So this is kind of like an aha moment when you're building an app, where you realize like the data and the user for your app are already there. All you're doing is building a better user experience. And then you're building it in a permanent way that, is going to live on without you. And so like that's, I don't know, that's a really empowering feeling as a builder, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you first start kind of diving in, at least at the point that I did, it did take a little bit of time to sink in. But the public square tutorial, which you wrote, what I think is one of the best kind of here's all the core features in a very walk through way, and you can really start to see that value emerge, like having data already there, having users already there, and again, like you said, is you're really taking advantage of some of the core traits of kind of Web3 with wallets and implementing authentication on the protocol level, as well as being able to query, the network for specific types of information and present it. One of the kind of effects of that is as builders get into the system, there's a lot of value in reading and writing data in kind of specific shapes, so that everybody can play well together. I think that's really cool, but that can be very hard too. So,
Yes. Yeah.
but any thoughts about kind of getting best practices in place and communicating those to developers so that everyone can kind of take advantage of these composability properties?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big unlocks there is the ANS 110, which describes a set of tags that describe the content or describe the data. So one of the unique and powerful properties of Arweave that enables its composability is that it isn't just a content ID. Like, it's not just an inscrutable hash that identifies your data on the network. And you kind of have to, like, I don't know what you would have to do there. You'd have to open up like a Word doc and write down your file name, and then paste the hash next to it in case you ever needed to look it up again. On Arweave, you can add metadata. You can have a title, you can have an author, you can have a description, you can add all of this stuff, and all of this metadata becomes queryable, which is where the roots of the composability of data come from. The fact that you can query the whole network and find all of the transactions, all of the data that has a tag that says, post, and then you can find all the posts. So the more projects and applications take advantage of these tags and the ANS 110 uh, standard for it, the more it becomes possible to compose the data. And I think that this is, this is something that us in the Arweave ecosystem can just be louder about, tagging data. Like there's been a lot of like different projects starting to store publications on Arweave. Like Hacker Noon is now publishing all of their articles on Arweave. HackMD now allows exporting of their markdown text to Arweave. Like it more and more. Mirror already uses it. Lenster or tons of projects are using this. But what I expect to happen is that as tags become more and more commonly used, you'll see these sort of multiplicative network effects. So going back to my previous example, where you talk about Facebook and Twitter, and they have like walled gardens around their network effects to sort of lock their users in. Those network effects are very powerful, and especially like in Facebook's case, they're able to leverage it to build a very profitable ad business. But what happens when those walls break down? You can actually get multiplicative network effects. Like you can build. Imagine if like all of the Web 2 applications that we use today were built on the Permaweb. There would be this combinational explosion of having all of this data from all these different data sets, and the things that people could do to like experiment with that data and build new use cases and allow people to migrate. Like what it would do is it would dramatically increase competition, because now applications would have to provide the best possible user experience, and and any application that tries to sort of extract value and lock you in and treat you as the product, people will just migrate to another application, and their data will just follow them because it's stored on this permanent layer, and it's associated with their wallet, which moves with them. That's an identity that they own. And so I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing these multiplicative combinations of network effects, where you have all of these disparate applications posting their data to Arweave. But what it does is it creates this big data set that has a ton of value, that then people can start building applications on this larger data set.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And I think we are getting, closer to some things like that. And yes, I agree. We have to figure out how to be more outward focusing on some of these specifications and best practices. So, because the more, it is a huge network effect, because, and again, I don't think of apps as competing, but providing different experiences for different users, right? Because it's hard to have one app that satisfies every user, even if it's working with the same types of data.
That's a very good point to make. Yeah, in that world, it's hard to imagine there being like one super app that there's like everybody uses. More than likely, because apps, it's not that it increases that they all have to compete with one another, but it's because the data sets are there and they're available. It allows more people to participate and for more experimentation to happen. It's like before Twitter shut down its APIs, there used to be this whole ecosystem of different Twitter clients that were all doing different things. And actually, we're starting to see this a little bit in the Web3 social, whether it's Lens or Warpcast or Nostr. There's this underlying protocol, and then there's all these different client implementations. Some of them are mobile, some of them are desktop, some of them are browser, and they're all being built, and they offer different user experiences, and they all work, and they can all coexist in the same ecosystem. So I see that being are they all competing? It's more like it's unlocking innovation by like lowering the barriers to entry.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess as these systems ecosystems mature, it may get, pretty competitive, but I agree. I think you're seeing a lot of innovation unlock, and it's choice is good. Choice, I think, is a good thing. Um, just shifting topics a little bit. I know you spend a lot of time on Twitter and a lot of time on Discord, having just wonderful discussions about Arweave and the Permaweb. What's some of your favorite discussions that you've had lately?
I mean, I think my favorite discussions excuse me, are really the ones about decentralization. Like that's uh, the thing I think I appreciate a lot about the Arweave ecosystem and the Arweave protocol itself is that how seriously it takes decentralization. Um, it's this completely permissionless protocol. It's run by all these different miners. Very few of which are actually on Amazon. Some blockchains sort of run the majority of their participants are just running on Amazon Web Services, but that isn't the case with Arweave because Arweave mining is a competitive space. It's actually just not profitable. By the time Amazon takes its margins, its markups, it's actually not profitable to run a miner there. And so people have to come up with other solutions. And what that does is it creates a more decentralized network. And so I really appreciate the values in the ecosystem of people wanting to create censorship resistant, decentralized applications. And yeah, and thinking about building a future that empowers individuals. That that that's I think what originally drew me to the Arweave ecosystem, and still what I enjoy. Uh, yeah, chatting about.
Very cool. Yeah, decentralization is, sometimes it may feel overused, but it's like, one of those things that resonates with me as well yeah, some avenues may not be like the easy way when
Mm,
decentralization, but it's like if you let any centralized component in your app stack, you're kind of you're kind of letting this kind of infection
yeah.
that has the potential to spread over the entire stack. And
What
you
fascinates
have to
me
think
about
about that.
this, about decentralization and building decentralized protocols and projects and applications, is like there's this very narrow corridor of possibility. Like the guardrails that you have to stay within to keep something decentralized are like very narrow, and so you have to sort of thread this needle to like try to deliver the functionality or the utility that you want um, in a decentralized way. And I just, for me, both for the value, the properties of decentralization, but also the challenge of it, I find it endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I really enjoyed this talk. I hope the viewers and listeners out there has enjoyed this. But if people want to continue to get in touch with you, what are the best places to do that?
DMac on Arweave, both on Twitter and Telegram. And then I'm also active in the Arweave developer Discord. And I do kind of keep tabs on the mining Discord. But yeah, Arweave is kind of interesting. There's a couple different Discords for Permaweb developers and those interested in building applications on top of Arweave. The Arweave Dev Discord is definitely the place.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for the chat, and yeah, talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Tom.